Hey everybody, we are live. It is 9 p.m. London time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. in the Rocky Mountains. Good to see all of you guys. It is Redacted, everyone. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, or they usually heap a big pile of propaganda and BS on top of it. Today, we're going to talk about why is President Trump, or why are sources saying that President Trump could be aligned to go to prison in the early part or middle part of September. Number of different sources coming forward and confirming this story that the judge in the hush money trial is going to sentence Trump to prison time. That could happen, and he would be sentenced on September 18th. We're going to dive deep into these latest I wouldn't say rumors. If you're getting confirmation directly from certain sources, we're going to talk about that on the show today.
Plus, you may have heard that the WHO has declared an emergency over monkeypox. We have lingering questions. We are going to ask them while we are still allowed, because if past is prologue, when we were not allowed to ask certain questions about COVID, I'm going to lay them all out, what we know and what we don't know about this monkeypox emergency.
We're also going to talk about propaganda, and what the mainstream media is doing right now. Why are the attacks on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ramping up? Of course, they've hated him from the very beginning. Of course, he called out their BS on COVID, on vaccines, all of those things on multiple levels. He's of course going to get rid of the CIA. So why are the mainstream media lining up right now with a new round of attacks on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. right now, right ahead of this election? It's interesting timing. We're going to look at that today. Mm-hmm. We're also going to look at the United Kingdom, and why is the United Kingdom, where's the money, and why is this happening right now in the United Kingdom? All the protests and the violence, the coverage of the violence, sort of the back and forth battle right now that's happening. Is there a civil war about to emerge in the UK? But why is this happening now? Where is the spark, and where is the money flow? So we're going to dive a little deeper into this today in a way that we haven't before on the show.
All right, well, we're going to kick it off with monkeypox. And I made you a graphic, you guys, that maybe you want to screenshot later, because these are all the things that we are not being told about monkeypox. So as we go through this and we either decide we buy it or we don't buy it, whether or not monkeypox is an emergency, is it a pandemic? Are we in an actual crisis? Is it something that your country needs to participate with another country to fund? And do we need to hand over our privacy and our freedoms for this? Well, we're going to go over again what we know and what we don't know, because I am afraid that soon we're not going to be allowed to know these things.
Soon these platforms may start censoring us, like, of course, YouTube censored around COVID, blocking stories and coverage about that.
Right.
And now, with this new WHO declared monkeypox crisis, are they going to ban and censor what we're able to say about it?
Okay, so we are currently free to ask these questions, right? Okay. It is August 2024. Right now, we're free, but let's see how long that lasts. Earlier this week, we warned that monkeypox was going to be declared a global crisis, and then that happened. The World Health Organization has declared that monkeypox is now a public health emergency of international concern. They're calling that PHEIC. Fake. This is what I'm going to call it.
That's the acronym?
Well, it's PHEIC.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it fake. It's a fake, okay? Because that's how I'm pronouncing that word.
That's great.
That acronym. You decide if you want to call it fake. I'm going to call it fake. You see what I'm doing there? Okay, so now they're calling it Mpox, though, because I guess that's a negative association with African gay men, the word monkey. Cases are rising in Africa, and they're telling us that it will spread abroad if we don't have international cooperation. And then right on cue, as soon as they said that, now there are reports about the first case being confirmed outside of Africa in Sweden. Now, monkeypox was discovered in 1958 after outbreaks occurred in monkeys that were kept for research. So possible gain of function, spidey sense going on there. Here's the press release from the WHO about it this week. You should seek it out and read it for yourself. Okay, but how can we get monkeypox? Well, they're not actually being straight with us about that. Again, from this announcement this week, they say that it comes mainly through sexual networks, but also there are different modes of transmission and different levels of risk. I'm not comfortable with that. Different. Like, how?
Yeah, be specific.
How do we know, given that it's a small outbreak and we're afraid that it could transmit? It's just, there's different ways.
There's different ways.
Like if I just run around rubbing my junk on things, I could be spreading monkeypox, or like what is different? I mean, that does sound different.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could be touching cash, like back when you got COVID. Remember, you couldn't use cash. Maybe that's how you can spread monkeypox. I mean, what's the different mode?
You have underwear made out of cash because it's mostly through your genitals. So is that a thing?
That's the only underwear I wear. Is underwear made out of cash.
Yeah. So this word different gives me pause. You would think that the media would say, well, wait. What are those? Can we narrow that down a little bit? Like, do you get it, from bungee jumping? Do you get it from what? What are we talking about here? Different. In fact, in 2022, the WHO confirmed that it is spread through what they call MSM, or men who have sex with men. They published this document here to show that, yes, it is mostly about gay sex, but we should not be homophobic about it. By the way, what is that graphic? We're talking about monkeypox and men who have sex with men, so they show us a phone?
They show like a phone of someone like trolling Grindr or something.
They couldn't have maybe showed us a photo of what the virus looks like or a man or something. Instead, it's just like men who have sex with men are constantly trolling on their phones. Isn't that a weird graphic? Anybody else think that that's strange?
Yes.
Okay, but the WHO, again, needs to define not just this MSM contact, but this different modes of transition. Maybe this is why former CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said in 2022 that 2 children had contracted monkeypox from gay men.
We do have seen now 2 cases that have occurred in children. Both of those children are traced back to individuals who come from the men who have sex with men community, the gay men community. And so when we have seen those cases in children, they have generally been what I call adjacent to the community most at risk.
Well, okay.
What? What the hell?
Yeah. Why? What children in gay communities? Like children who happened to be in gay, like they had gay fathers? Or was it children who had been victims of sexual assault? Or
they're going to blame it on the jungle gyms again, and they're going to rope it off with police tape.
Okay. Again, but jungle gyms are not specific to the gay community. So it was children who got it from within the gay community.
They're going to find gay jungle gyms.
Okay.
And they're going to figure out how to keep the kids off of them.
Again, how does that happen? That's not just different. We deserve an answer. I don't want to know it, but I think we should ask. Now, monkeypox is not spread through the air. It is spread through skin contact, and it is usually a sexually transmitted virus, but different. And symptoms are similar to smallpox, but different. They're actually less severe normally. Monkeypox is rarely fatal, but the WHO says now that they have recorded 500 deaths. They are not telling us, what do we know about those deaths? How were the cases confirmed? Were there contraindications of those people's health? We don't get to know. So how did something with such a low fatality rate suddenly become so much more fatal? They say that they've had 1,500 cases this year and 500 deaths. That's a 1/3 fatality rate from something that was not formerly fatal. How'd that happen?
That's a frightening rate. I mean, that's Ebola rate. Like, I mean, fortunately, Ebola doesn't spread that well easily because I mean that's a very high mortality rate.
Yes, it is. How'd that happen all of a sudden? Now they're saying this is a new clade, which means it's a descendant of the original monkeypox organism. Now, I want to remind you because you may think, haven't I heard this before? Yes, you have, because in fact, the WHO declared monkeypox a fake in 2022, but that ended in May of 2023 after a decline in cases. This week, WHO Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove said that a monkeypox, that it came back because we weren't paying attention to it.
These pathogens do not respect borders. There's a lot of things that are happening with Mpox. This is an outbreak that caused a public emergency of international concern. There was some attention to this. The tension waned. There's an ongoing outbreak that's happening, particularly this clade 1b, which we know is more severe than clade 2, is being detected in a number of additional countries. But this is detecting circulation. This can be stopped if we actually put a concerted effort into this. We do not want the world to sit and watch and wait until. The time is now for us to take much more measures and provide much more support to the African region, to the countries that are affected across the entire spectrum, from surveillance to prevention to risk communication to clinical care to infection prevention control to R&D to the use of vaccines. It's now.
It's now. I was wondering if she was going to get to vaccines. So surveillance, we need to watch all of you. Biometric scanners.
Glad you caught that.
We need vaccines right now. We need to roll these things out right now.
Yeah, and she thinks that viruses spread when we turn our back to them. That's what happens. We just weren't paying attention, like a kid with a crayon. Okay, or that. Yeah, like when your kids are quiet in the living room. Yeah, then something's wrong, right? Then they're drawing on the walls with crayons. That's what viruses do. Yeah,
apparently. When you hear your children, they're quiet in the other room.
Yeah,
you know
you got Sharpie on the walls.
The Sharpie on the wall.
Yes,
just like monkeypox.
You guys like covered this over a year ago of the like. This is what they're looking for is to anything that they can pull the trigger on the entire process. They don't want to wait for this to get into anything. They don't know that it's going to be anything, but they still want to run the entire process, the full gamut of what they got, and that's they just waiting.
I mean, I'm watching her say this, and I'm like, how can you say this in good conscience, knowing that we don't have all the answers yet to how it's differently transmitted? Why is it suddenly more fatal? What do we know about these fatalities? Like, how can you get up there and say this to the world? The only answer that I could give her is that her eyebrows are so strange that maybe she's a bot. I'm very distracted by her eyebrows.
It's akin to like, I was gonna say, like, it's akin to like if I hear a bump on my porch. And like my reaction is like I immediately call the police, start blasting through the door with a shotgun, flip on my floodlights, like unplug my internet and just like everything I can possibly do in case there is an intruder or whatever. And it's like, but you don't know what that bump was. Yeah, it's a cat.
Right.
So,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. But also don't forget Africa, right? And don't forget, of course, the coverage that we've given it on the show here, the history of Bill Gates and his test. Whitney Webb, of course, has covered this here on the show. We've talked extensively about the testing of and rollout of vaccines and testing on people in Africa.
Well, let's talk about vaccines.
Unwitting population of Africa.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect place to roll out surveillance and digital IDs on an unwitting population when these billionaires can run and do this. Jeffrey Epstein, specifically in Africa, working in coordination with Bill Gates in Africa. So don't forget about Africa in that way.
Oh, no, we're not going to. And in fact, this same doctor told us just last week, we played you a clip of her saying that COVID vaccines should be taken every 12 months, is what she said, because COVID cases are increasing. She did not say that there were more hospitalizations or death or severe COVID, just that we need to be taking the vaccines full stop. Well, in fact, there is a vaccine for monkeypox. It was not developed for this current strain, but the WHO now is calling for rapid development of a new one to be submitted for what they're calling emergency evaluation. So they want a quick vaccine. They want it to be fast-tracked. Does that sound familiar? And in fact, in 2022, when the WHO first declared the monkeypox emergency, we reported this study from 2017, and people were, in fact, being stopped from sharing it that showed that resveratrol can block the replication of many pox diseases. Do you remember that?
Wait, so when we covered the fact that resveratrol, which many people always talk about, red wine has it or whatever,
right.
Whatever, that's another Trojan horse. But yes, that resveratrol could stop the spread of it. So you're saying that when we did that story, people weren't able to share the story and it was being blocked on social media?
In 2022, people were being punished for sharing that story on Twitter and Facebook. But
Why?
it still exists. The data is still there showing that resveratrol can stop certain pox.
Isn't that interesting? It's just like, when we found out we knew, and Dr. McCullough on our show and others talking about ivermectin, the benefits of zinc, right? Vitamin D and ivermectin, stuff that people can't make billions of dollars off of, right?
As red wine is not a curative and it's not found in high enough quantities. No matter what CNN tells you, alcohol is not beneficial for your health. So don't do that. What I want to point out here is that there is data that shows that there's a naturally occurring compound that maybe could be concentrated to stop the spread of certain pox viruses, such as monkeypox. But oddly enough, the WHO does not mention this study or any furthering of studies like this in their calls for an emergency. That's funny, right? Because they don't want any readily available treatment that they can't patent and sell. They want a brand new vaccine. Now, Russia is telling its citizens to stand down. They are actually not worried about the spread of this. They're on top of it, they're saying. They don't think it's a big concern. So are we saying then here on Redacted that monkeypox is not a concern? No, of course not. We're not saying that. We are saying we still have lingering questions that we want to ask while we still can. So while you see these studies roll through your feed, roll through the news, think about these questions that I've prepared for you here, and then just ask yourself, is any of the news coverage addressing these questions? And until we have answers to these questions, we should not concede to an emergency or giving over of our rights or privacy until we know these things. So here are the lingering questions we still don't have. You can screenshot this if you want. Number one, how did it mutate from one clade to a next? Number two, was it gain of function? I would like to know that. Number three, what are the different modes of transmission that the WHO talks about in their press release besides just men who have sex with men? They're just saying it's different. I would like to know specifically how they know that and what qualifies as different. Also, how is the WHO confirming these cases? Because during the COVID pandemic, we saw problem with the types of tests that were being rolled out, that those tests had a high failure rate. So what do we know about those tests? Did the 500 deaths that they're telling us about now have pre-existing conditions? Can we in fact confirm that they were caused by monkeypox, or were those deaths with monkeypox? And what of the currently available treatment, such as resveratrol? So until we get answers to those things, we do not concede to an emergency and therefore the concession of our rights for said fake emergency.
Even then, even after we have those answers.
I mean, well, okay, but we need to leave space for the fact that maybe all of those are true. Maybe it's mutated. Maybe it's no longer just transmitted by sex. Maybe it's really bad. Maybe that's the case, but I want solid answers to these things, because any one of those questions asked about the COVID pandemic could have pulled the rug out from under the COVID pandemic. So we know now from experience, sadly, to ask those questions. So we're asking those questions. So save those questions. That's for you. I made that for you. Don't give up your rights until you get satisfactory answers to those questions.
One thing I think is very, very telling out of that is that they want an emergency use. They're saying we want a vaccine for emergency use authorization. Like that's telling.
Yeah, that is very.
So they're making it emergency.
Yeah, exactly. They want to create the emergency, and as we covered here on the show a few weeks ago on Whitney Webb's website, Unlimited Hangout, I think Max Jones was on the show talking about how the creation of the sort of permanent pandemic marketplace for these biopharmaceuticals, right? That's the idea, is that they won't have to run through the normal channels of clinical trials, that they'll be the plan which has been unearthed in these documents, is that they are going to create sort of a permanent pandemic marketplace.
Right. Towards the end of last year, let's see if I can find it. We did a chart about all of the vaccines that had been authorized just in 2023 that were either fast-tracked or emergency use authorization. I can't find that chart right now, but I had at least, I want to say 5 on that list. It was 3 RSV vaccines, the new COVID booster. I can't remember. So now there are very few new products that make it to market that have the full clinical trials any longer. And so this just seems to be the way of things, and everyone's going to say that's the way it is. Sorry, we did good enough tests, so that's how this is going to go.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. That now they just go through emergency use authorization. They don't have to go through that entire process of clinical
Clayton
trials.
always puts a TH in the place it's not supposed to be.
Emergency youth authorization.
Has nothing to do with youth.
Can you guys all say that? Everyone watching right now, I know all of you, the tens of thousands of you, try to say those words quickly and see how many of you get tongue-tied. See them.
Well, we have more news to get to.
Hold on, we had a super chat. Yeah, I want to see this. Psyops says the worst is if there is a real contagion and it's serious, the government's cried wolf, and a real response may be derailed due to trust. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Great point.
Well, that's why we don't say, oh, this has got to be fake, because we don't know. But all we know is that there are still big questions. So we're not going to present this to you like, oh, of course, monkeypox is nothing. We don't know that it's something, and we don't know that it's nothing, because we know that the people who are saying it's something, we don't trust.
Right. They've lied to us before.
Right.
Yes, they've lied to us before. All right. Yes, we do have more news to get to here on your Thursday. Is President Trump going to jail? Well, the evidence is mounting, and the sources are coming forward saying, yes, that is the case. We're going to dive deep into this story today. Is President Trump going to jail in September? That is next. But first, well, the rest of 2024 seems to be intriguing for investors, myself included. We have the U.S. presidential election, of course. Will it be Trump? Will it be Harris? Will it be somebody else? We don't know. Will we see inflation reduced? Will we see Fed rate cuts coming in September? If you're interested in exploring stocks related to these election themes right now, the Moomoo trading app is also our sponsor today. It's a great tool to help you get started trading. You know, we see these big periods and big swings in the economies, whether it's 2008 or 2020, given the pandemic, and a lot of money was made by people who were smart investing at the time, strategizing and investing in companies that really could be propelled to the future after those crisis periods end. Another option you can do right through the Moomoo app instead of just regular stocks is ETFs. These ETFs offer high liquidity and low entry barriers. You can easily check their status with just one click. You'll find detailed information like fund company data, position details, management fees, helping you make informed decisions when you're investing. All of it is in the Moomoo app. Now, I recently teamed up and brought you exclusive benefits to our U.S. audience, up to 20 free stocks. Yes, you're going to get 20 free stocks, 5 more than the usual new user bonus, only if you sign up through our link right here on your screen and meet the deposit requirement by the 31st of August. Terms and conditions apply. Make sure you use our link to sign up and lock in those benefits. On top of that, you can also join and enjoy the 8.1% APY for a limited time. So if you've got cash just sitting in the account and you haven't invested it, 8.1% APY for a limited time. Check out right now on our website, right here, the link on your screen. Grab it today. The app is also available for Canadian users, offering a 6% per annum on funds under $10,000 for 60 days and a steady 2% per annum for funds over $10,000. Just use the very same link below to sign up and check out all the additional benefits for Canada. All right. Thanks to Moomoo for supporting the show. Some people asking today, is that my shirt?
No.
No, it's not my shirt. That's her own shirt.
It's got like a little tie on it here, Clayton.
She's got the Anna Paulina thing going on.
Tie his shirts.
Yeah, no. So
like it's a bit of a belly shirt.
It's a bit of a belly shirt.
But I don't want to wear it.
And then other people are asking about my eye craziness, because the other day I got like the red eye from these contact lenses and I had an allergic reaction. They gave me these like steroid drops. So it's like day 3 now of the steroid drops.
Day 3 of going off the doobies.
Yeah, day 3 of not smoking the marijuana anymore. No, day 3 of on the steroid drops, and I've not worn the contacts now for 3 days. So we're gonna, once that is done in a week, then we'll go back to contacts, trying out a new set with different.
He's a glutton for punishment.
I
I will stick with the
But
glasses.
I can't stand glasses. I hate taking the readers on and off, and I can't see crap. Anyway, I got to put the glasses on for this.
But
next.
they look cute on you. It's a good look.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I've been saying for more than a year on this show that the deep state will not allow President Trump to become president. I know many of you get angry with me when I say that, but look at the two different assassination attempts now. I mean, come on, right? So they will also, by the way, not allow RFK Jr. to become president of the United States. Not going to happen. Well, over the past few hours, something very strange started happening, as journalist Colin Rugg pointed out on political betting site Polymarket. These are really interesting to pay attention to because a lot of people are going to make a lot of money depending on who becomes president of the United States. A lot of people betting a lot of money. So now on Polymarket, suddenly Kamala Harris is crushing it to become the next president of the United States. A lot of people are betting a lot of money that she will in fact become president of the United States. Vegas betting odds 54% to 45%, which is odd because new polling out today, even in independent polls and independent swing states, show that President Trump is winning. And a new Fox News poll out also shows that President Trump unchanged from about a month ago. 1 point up on Biden-Harris, and that has not changed despite all of the media attention of Kamala Harris. So why is that betting website and why are Vegas odds bettors really now picking Kamala Harris? Like, you got to ask yourself a question. Could it have anything to do with this? Which is that multiple high-level sources have stated that New York City Department of Corrections is making arrangements for Donald J. Trump's arrival at Rikers Island in September, according to Tony Saruja. Now, he's not the only one. Of course, Rikers Island New York City officials have confirmed this as well. But this is Rikers Island here. So take a look. This is where Trump would go, according to these sources, among 6,300 inmates. And there's all sorts of problems with Rikers Island. I mean, Mayor Eric Adams, of course, has been trying to keep Rikers Island from getting under federal control. The feds have basically said, hey, we want to take control of this facility because it's out of hand. It's too crazy. So they're actively trying to work to make sure that it doesn't go into federal hands right now. A disaster. And they're trying to take over Rikers Island. So Tony Saruja said President Trump. So that was August 1st when Tony first posted that. OK, and I've been watching this to see what other sources are now confirming this. Other individuals coming forward to say, yes, this is true. And then he doubled down on it last night, saying President Trump will 100% be sentenced to prison on September 18th. I'm told the sentence will be 1 year, but we'll see. The Marxist judge could change the sentencing at the last minute, but he is definitely sentencing President Trump to at least 1 year. Rikers Island already has special accommodations ready. This is 2 months before the election.
Now, the Trump team did again ask Judge Marchand to recuse himself just this week because of his conflicts, but it's up to him. It's up to the person they say has a conflict to recuse himself, and he refused for a third time.
For a third time.
Yeah. No, thank you, he says. I'm staying on this case. I like it here.
It's okay that my daughter actively worked for
for Kamala Harris.
For Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up. No, I won't recuse myself.
Right.
Okay. So now we have additional confirmation on this from Alex Jones. Alex Jones now saying this: the deep state knows no shame, and they are desperate. Our sources confirm that a section of Rikers Island has been prepared for President Trump. Then he even went further to say that he would be imprisoned. Today confirming that he would be imprisoned on September 18th, did Alex Jones. Okay, again, I don't have any independent confirmation of this. And the sources that I've been speaking to don't have any confirmation on this either. So Alex Jones, Tony Saruja, and a new report from Shore News Network also saying Rikers Island reportedly preparing prison cell for former U.S. President Donald Trump. Andrew McCarthy, who is got a solid background as a former U.S. attorney, and he now works for Fox News as a columnist, says he will be sentenced, but he will not likely go to prison. So now Andrew McCarthy saying he won't go to prison, but Alex Jones, Tony Saruja, and others saying that he will be imprisoned for at least 1 year. It's unbelievable to say that out loud, isn't it? Think about what's going to happen.
Well, no. Look at Pakistan. Imran Khan is imprisoned, and he, is a popular candidate, and his party did win elections. So, I mean, I don't know why we think we're better than Pakistan. If it can happen there, it can happen here.
So, Mick, I like this tweet. The deep state right now is playing all the angles, mate. They're throwing RFK Jr. to the wolves. They're preparing the jail cells for Trump. They'll no doubt try to take him out again. These people don't play by the rules. America is at a turning point like never before. I see some people in the chat saying, this is going to be civil war. And perhaps, but think about what violence took place after they tried to assassinate President Trump. Can you think of any? Can you think of any violence that came out of him being convicted? I mean, people throw around the term civil war, and I've certainly I've had those thoughts as well. And I'm saying to myself, who's going to rise up? You saw a trucker convoy in Canada, right? There's nothing in the United States. Like, everyone's been compliant.
Yeah.
These people are just rolling over Americans right now, and they're just being compliant. They're being sheep. Are you going to see like conservative men by the hundreds of thousands marching on Washington? Are you going to see hundreds of thousands of people saying enough is enough? You've imprisoned President Trump, and they're going to take to the streets?
Well, we certainly won't see anything out of the Republican Party because they're jellyfish.
No, I mean, look, you have Speaker Johnson literally decided after an assassination on a president calls a 3-week vacation. We still are getting answers, trying to get answers to questions about this assassination. You take a 3-week vacation in the United States. Like, they don't care about President Trump. They don't care about it at all. So it is a uniparty in the United States. But I don't know. I mean, I keep hearing about these like militias. There's like 100,000 people ready to go. There are like a couple 100,000 American men like ready to go. Okay, where? Where is this happening?
Right. And we're not calling for this, just in case, anyone said, like, we're not saying that at all. We don't want anybody to get hurt. We want a complete overhaul of government. We want to end the Fed and the Department of Education and the CIA. Like, we want that. We don't want anybody marching to get hurt in any form or fashion. But, I also think it doesn't help to just type out things like, civil war. But what do we want specifically?
It's like, do they want civil war? I mean, that's one thing to do, is to question. And are they hoping that there will be unrest and civil unrest in the United States, flooding our country with millions of illegal immigrants, right? To create civil unrest in the United States so that we become even more compliant, go into lockdowns and, to have, sweep in and take guns away and all of this stuff, biometric scanners and tracking movements and everything like this. Of course, they're already doing this to illegal immigrants as they come across the border with biometric scanners. So we know that that's happening. So again, I think it's about compliance right now, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. Anyway, Donald Trump just a short time ago tweeted this or posted this on Truth Social. He said, Judge Merchan just ruled that I, the Republican candidate for president and leading in the polls, am still under a gag order concerning very important things which must be brought to light. I am not allowed to answer reporters' questions on this particular subject. Can you believe this? He says. The New York courts refuse to act. This is happening right before the voting begins on September 6th. Suppression and manipulation of the vote. Voter interference. This is real fascist stuff, he says. The old Soviet Union. So much to say, and I'm not allowed to say it. Must get U.S. Supreme Court involved. New York is trying to steal the election. So, again, Tony Saruja, Alex Jones, confirming that he will, in fact, be imprisoned on September 18th. He says, the deep state knows no shame. They are desperate. And our sources confirm that a section of Rikers Island has been prepared for President Trump. I should say also, the New York Times has also confirmed this. Sorry, I skipped over this, but let me go back to this New York Times piece if I can, Philip. And according to Mayor Eric Adams, says that Rikers, staffed by professionals, is ready for Trump. So again, they're ready. And this is confirmed by the New York Times. On the Rikers piece of this, I think the new piece of this, though, is from Tony and Alex saying that they have a date and it's confirmed that he will be sentenced to 1 year again. So I guess we'll find out. That's when the sentencing was already delayed until September 18th.
Yes.
So based on sort of what he was waiting, and he made a weird statement, the judge did, based on that Supreme Court ruling, right? So it gave him a little bit of like presidential immunity, but maybe not enough. And I don't know, but we'll see. Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on this. Will this lead to a civil war in the United States? And do you think that President Trump will be sentenced and imprisoned? It's one thing to be sentenced. It's another thing altogether to be imprisoned, as Alex Jones and Tony Saruja have now said. All right, we've got more news to get to.
We're going to talk about RFK Jr., why the press wants to make it seem like he has bent the knee to Kamala Harris. Why would they do that? What's the angle? It's pretty obvious, but we're going to take a look anyway. And why is the UK on fire? Why are they losing their rights in the United Kingdom just as we breathe and eat? We're going to talk to a guest about that. But first,
the ability to provide for your family has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. The Kamala Harris campaign right now trying to distance itself from the Biden administration's disastrous economy. Prices for energy, food, clothing, housing, all of it up over 20% across the board. You know, when you go shopping, you're getting less, but spending the same. You have to decide what to buy, what to do without. And when you get to check out, you're swiping that credit card, putting you in even further debt. It's a never-ending cycle. There's got to be a better way, and that's with our friends at American Financing. If you're a homeowner, they will take all of that equity that you built up, use it to pay off that high-interest debt. They are saving consumers an average of $854 a month, and they're closing some in as fast as 10 days. Start today. You might be able to delay your mortgage payment, 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today, 866-890-8434. That's 866-890-8434. Or visit americanfinancing.net/redacted. Their NMLS number, 182334-NMLS, consumeraccess.org.
Well, the media has never taken Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s candidacy seriously. They take every shot at him that they can think of because they want Democrats to continue to be in power. It's very clear. Now, a new Washington Post reports that RFK Jr. has kissed the ring of Kamala Harris, so to speak. Clearly, they're doing this because they are afraid that he will split the liberal vote away from the Democrats. So the Post reporting that he tried to meet with Kamala Harris and saying, well, he was trying to grovel for a place in the administration if he agrees to endorse her. According to the Post here, the Harris campaign ghosted him. They say the latest round of outreach follows earlier efforts to convince Democrats that Kennedy would make a better candidate than their Biden. Even after Kennedy left the Democratic nomination fight to pursue an independent campaign for president last November, his advisors continue to press the case privately that he should have replaced Biden as the nominee. So they say that because he secretly wanted that nomination and didn't get it, well, then he's just angling for breadcrumbs. But here is that supreme irony, is that Democrats never really were given the choice to vote for him in the primaries. And I argue he could have been actually a very formidable Democratic candidate for that party. But they had Biden pushed on them in the primaries. And then when the deep state decided that Biden couldn't win, they did a bait and switch and they were stuck with Harris. So Democrats very well may have chosen him if the primaries were done fairly, which they weren't, or if the press took him seriously, which they never did. Now, the Post strangely says, here's how they know that Kennedy reached out to the Post, is he used connections in Hollywood. You would think his last name's Kennedy. Doesn't he have more direct routes to people in politics than Hollywood directors? But here's what they say, that his campaign reached out to Democratic intermediaries, including Hollywood talent agent Ari Emanuel and Rob Reiner, the director. Honey, what did Rob Reiner do? Like Twins or whatever?
He played Meathead.
Okay.
Or is that his dad? I always get that mixed up.
I don't know.
He was a director. He's done a bunch of movies.
Yeah, like what? That's how these things are. Rob Reiner? What the hell? So also they're reporting that he had previously tried to reach out to Democrats through Airbnb founder Joe Gebbia. in an effort to get a message to Ron Klain, who was a longtime Biden admirer. So they're making him seem like this sort of spammy, like, hey, connect me with so-and-so. Like, that guy who texts you, can you introduce me to so-and-so type thing, angling his way into powerful connections. Kennedy himself responded and said that this report was not true. So did his running mate, Nicole Shanahan. Here's what she says. She says, confirming we are not in talks with Harris. Speaking personally, they're a lost cause, literally. Now, here's what he says, and I actually really like what he had to say. You can seek this out on Twitter because I know that doesn't look super good on your screen if you're watching on a mobile device. But he's saying that he would never have done this because the Democratic Party today would be unrecognizable to his father and uncle, and he cannot reconcile it with his values. He says the party that he once knew was the party of civil liberties and free speech, but now is the party of censorship, lockdowns, and medical coercion. The Democrats he knew were anti-war, but they are now neocon warmongers. True. His party that he knew and loved was the allies of mainstream cops, firefighters, and working people. But VP Harris's party is the party of big tech, big pharma, and Wall Street. What I have observed myself, that Democrats now are the warring party of censorship and control. I cannot see it any other way. And he makes excellent points, but we don't get this in the press because the press has never taken him seriously. They would never have allowed Democrats to actually consider primarying him in against Joe Biden specifically because of his anti-vaccine take, which is not at all anti-vaccine. If you listen to what he says, he's not anti-vaccine. He wants us all to understand that vaccines are not properly tested. They are not tested for how they can or cannot work together. They are not tested in their accumulation. These are things we should want answers to, but the press doesn't want us to even ask it. So they continue to take fairly cheap shots at him, such as this weird story that was in New York Magazine recently about him and a prank with a bear. I'm not going to go into it. It was a weird story about a bear and roadkill. You can easily find it for yourself. And if you do, watch his own explanation about it, which he posted to this Twitter on August 4th, where he explains it to Roseanne Barr. For some reason.
It was weird.
She's just standing there. They never explain why he's telling it to her, but He does tell the story in its entirety. I have some questions about it. It's a bit of a strange story. I want to say unequivocally, it is not the thing that should make you decide how to vote, is this bear story.
Right.
Anybody who is like, oh, well, I otherwise was gonna, but the bear thing, I just want to know how you prioritize your issues, because that to me is not it. But I think it's interesting to think about how the press will dig up all of these strange stories about his past, but we don't get very much about Kamala Harris's past. For instance, was she in fact a social climber? She dated Willie Brown and Montel Williams. Is that part of her personality? Can we say this about her? Why don't they dig about her past in the same way?
They put her on the front page of Time magazine instead.
Or this new front cover of Essence. Right.
Oh,
she's presented as this person with extreme gravitas. Here she's got a nice blowout. Her makeup looks good. She's looking optimistically towards the future. Right. We don't ever get images like this of RFK Jr. looking hopeful and powerful and things like that. If he wants that out there, he has to put it himself on Twitter. So I'm just observing these kind of threads that the press pulls in different manners for different parties. That's all I'm saying. Clearly, they think that RFK Jr. is more of a threat to Kamala Harris than he is to President Trump, and that's why they treat him this way. That's my derision. Let me know if you agree with me or not. Well, we have more news to get to. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to read a couple super chats.
Okay.
Let's see here. Ken Poe says, how are they not punishing Democrats for no primaries? That's a dictatorship. Exactly. I mean, and by the way, Black Lives Matter, as we covered yesterday on the show, Black Lives Matter has been vocal. They said we gave up our lives to be able to earn the right to vote, and you've taken the vote away from us. So Black Lives Matter, furious at the Democratic Party. It is a dictatorship. And we're going to see next week, obviously, at the DNC, what happens there. Someone else just left a $2 super chat, wanted to know if we would talk about Dr. Shiva. I've had Dr. Shiva on the show a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
I would go seek those interviews out with Dr. Shiva where we did a deep dive about how they totally tried to destroy him, and we talked about limited hangouts and all of that stuff. So I've had him on the show multiple times and deep diving how they went after him. So yeah, check that out if you're curious about Dr. Shiva. We do have more news to get to here on your Thursday. We are going to talk about the United Kingdom. Are they headed for a civil war? And is it on purpose? Who's behind it? Where's the money coming from? Who's trying to foment discontent across Europe right now? Does it have a purpose? Who stands to benefit? All questions we should be asking and not falling for the propaganda of these things. So we have a special guest. David Miller is going to join us to talk about that. But first, we want to talk about investing in precious metals, because we always talk about how the economy is circling the drain, that the U.S. dollar is debased because it's based on nothing. And so we talk about how can we hedge our bets and protect our money. And in fact, today, Peter St. Onge, economist, friend of the show and one of my favorite economists, talked about how it would actually be easy to revalue our currency if we just went back to basing it on metals. That means you couldn't just print it all you want. Well, we always tell you about our friends at Lear Capital, because they are a way that you can invest in metals, and you can also do it inside of your IRA. So in the words of Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki, everyone can afford to own some silver, and it's a great way to think about wealth preservation, if not investment, and hedging your bets in an uncertain economy. So you can invest either with money that you have or inside your IRA, and Lear will teach you how to do it. They walk you through it. They teach you what are the different assets of precious metals, what works best for you, how can you hold them. And again, you can hold them inside of an IRA so that you don't have to worry about investing outside of your expendable income. You can do it in a retirement account, because most people's retirement accounts, we've talked about many times, are just in the stock market, partnered with the government. So if you'd like something a little bit more punk rock, let Lear teach you how to do it. You can call them at 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. And again, silver moving above $30 an ounce. It's been going higher and higher since we've partnered with them. So give them a call. Let them teach you how to do this. Once again, call them 800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. Well, if you read the headlines, violence in the UK continues. Overnight, more violence on the streets, people sharing videos. If you share videos, of course, of this violence, you may be arrested, like this individual who's now getting 20 months in jail for sharing videos of this violence. Listen to this judge.
You have been committed for sentence, having pleaded guilty to an offence of publishing written material which is threatening, abusive or insulting, intending thereby to stir up racial hatred. The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 20 months imprisonment.
But I wanted to go deeper today on how this all started. It's one thing to be able to see these videos and be outraged, to see individuals walking the streets with machetes, to see protesters, see cars on fire, buildings on fire, and to be outraged on one side of this. But how did this all start? And I always want to look at the money. Follow the money. Follow the people behind it, like we see in the George Floyd protests in the United States or the Black Lives Matter protests. Where's the money coming from? How is this all being set up? David Miller is an academic researcher and journalist from the UK, and he joins us from the UK right now with an interesting take on all of this and how this spark led to what we're seeing today on television and in the newspapers. David, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I think the spark we saw with these three young girls in this dance studio being brutally murdered, and everything that was the tipping point moment in the UK and made international headlines, outrage around the world. And of course, immediately there were a lot of conclusions drawn about how this happened. But I think your point is that it didn't just start there. Can you explain to our audience what you know and maybe where this money has come from to spark all of this?
So the person who is involved, who is essentially the main spark for these demonstrations is a guy called Tommy Robinson. That's not his real name. He uses that name to sound a bit more English. His real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, which is an Irish name. And he shared the story about the killing of these three young girls, including that they were killed by a Muslim and then subsequently by an immigrant. Now, neither of those things was true. The person wasn't a Muslim, he's a Christian, and nor was he an immigrant. He had been born in the country. But nevertheless, that was enough to set off the anti-Islam riots, burnings of mosques, etc. And of course, Robinson is someone who has had a long involvement in British street politics as someone who's regarded as being on the far right, as being a bit of a fascist, I suppose is the terminology which would sometimes be used. But that goes back to the formation of something called the English Defence League in 2009. Now, that was part of a wider movement in Europe to encourage anti-Islam, anti-Muslim street movements. They were called across the whole of Europe. They had one title, that was the Counter-Jihad movement, the Counter-Jihad Europe. And these movements were sparked in particular by external forces, I suppose you could use the term, people who'd come from the US and were associated with neoconservative think tanks in the US, and they brought the money to set up these counter-jihad groups all over Europe, and indeed to set up the English Defence League. You want to follow the money? The English Defence League was set up at a meeting in 2009 in the London flat of one of the financiers, at which two US citizens, out of the 5 people who were present. And they came from an organisation called the Centre for Vigilant Freedom, which people probably won't remember now, but which was set up effectively by the Centre for Security Policy, one of the well-known neoconservative or anti-Islam think tanks in the US, which had quite a large number of Zionist funders, including people who had funded things like the Friends of the Israel Defence Forces. So that's the argument you see for where the EDL, the English Defence League, came from. And through the years since 2009, the EDL was demobilised in 2014, and Robinson becomes this kind of larger-than-life media character, and he's funded then by the pro-Israel mega donor Robert Shillman, who of course also funds the Friends of the Israel Defence Forces, is on the board of the David Horowitz Freedom Centre, again, which funds anti-Muslim activities. He's then also funded Nina Rosenwald, one of the key guests. He becomes a fellow at the Rebel News in Canada, which is run by a very prominent, well-known Canadian Zionist. And so you can see that here, that he's effectively someone who's on the far right, who's made an alliance, as have many on the far right in the last 15 years, made an alliance with the Zionists. They move away from being seen as Judeophobic or anti-Semitic, and they move towards being primarily anti-Muslim. And that's the tendency. And so what you have is that effectively Israel has large sections of the far right. In the UK, for example, I know it's not true in the UK, there's hardly any parts of the far right which are anti-Zionist, which remain anti-Zionist. Almost all of the far right has been co-opted by effectively by the Zionist movement, by the Israelis. Now, what is the point? I would say, one, they want to street movement to pressure society, UK, France or Germany.
Hold on a second, David. Your signal was breaking up there pretty bad. So you say, what is their, I'll have you repeat that part where you say, what is their motivation? And you can start it from there if you'd like. So David, what is their motivation?
Well, look, they encourage street movements in European countries, in the UK, in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands. And the object is to pressure those countries to become more and more anti-Muslim. And so they do that with street movements from below, but they also do it from above with the funding of Islamophobic and neoconservative think tanks who push government policy in a more and more anti-Muslim direction. New definitions of extremism, which target specifically Muslims for extremism, don't target anybody else. And so that's the way in which this operates. There's an attempt to push policies which are anti-Muslim. For that, of course, is that Muslims, not only Muslims, of course, but Muslims tend to be very supportive of the Palestinians. And that's the key reason why it wants to target Muslims in Western countries. And that's part of the reason why they want to say that Muslims are taking over.
So you say that it's their motivation. What evidence do you have specifically? I mean, is it in their documents? Is it on their websites that this is their motivation, is to sort of stir up unrest about Muslims, create, I guess, Islamophobia, and push this narrative that Islamists are taking over, tearing down businesses, wielding machetes, taking to the streets? Is that's what they're trying to push out there? Are they lying about that? I mean, are there any kernels of truth to that? I mean, can you help paint a picture for us on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, look, the argument comes from the mid 1980s onwards. I mean, there was a famous conference in Washington D.C. in 1984, organized by a guy called Benjamin Netanyahu, who is, of course, the current Prime Minister. And that was the first place where the idea of such a thing as Islamic terrorism was first broached. And that became very popular in Western security establishments, as directed the counterterrorism policy of the US, the UK, France and Germany, many other countries too, to say that the major threat to Western civilization comes from Islam, not from Western foreign policy, not from involvement in killing 1 million people in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in Libya or in Syria. It comes from Islam. And that's the push that you got from that. That comes from a conference, as I said, organized by Netanyahu and staffed, the people who spoke, they were well-known Zionist intellectuals. It was popularized then, and that's part of the underlying set of themes. So you also have things like the concept of Eurabia, the idea that the Muslims, the Arabs, are taking over Europe, which of course was popularized by a writer called Giselle Littman, who writes under the pen name Bat Yor. She, of course, was a former Mossad agent in an operation in 1961 in Morocco. So you can see the lineage in terms of, you're talking about documents. Yes, of course, these concepts were originated by the Zionists.
And so the idea we've covered on our show for any length of time for anyone who cares to pay attention, the motivation, of course, right? The neoconservative movement, the Dick Cheney, George W. Bush era, of course, born out of the late 1980s as well. The idea that we need to have a bad guy, right? We need to have terrorists. We need to create forever wars in the United States. Like if you're watching right now and you're wondering, well, what's the motivation? Well, it's in the United States side, it's the military-industrial complex. You create a forever war. If you create something intangible like a war on terror, it never ends. Therefore, they make billions of dollars off of the war on terror, right? But there's different motivations coming from the Netanyahu side, which is to stir up this fear and terror throughout Europe. And then, of course, you'll be more likely to support measures that help Israel. And, of course, we'll want to attack Iran. We'll want to attack Syria. We'll want to go after these Islamist terrorists, right? I mean, is that the motivation at the heart of it?
That's absolutely right. And, of course, the neocons essentially were a Zionist movement from the beginning. The neocons as a movement starts off, as you'll know, with the immigration of radical Jewish immigrants from Europe who are mainly Trotskyists, some of whom were then recruited by the CIA, and they cross over by the 60s and 70s into becoming neocons. They then play a key role in the Reagan administration, of course, as you mentioned, the George W. Bush administration. Yes, of course, this is part of the same social movement which wants to put Israel first, and of course the military-industrial complex has a key role in that. But yes, the reason that they want to do this is to encourage the US to continue to give them huge sums of money for 2,000 pound bombs that they can drop on the heads of little children in Gaza.
And of course, we've covered on our show extensively about HIAS, the Hebrew International Aid Society, if I have the acronym correct, working with the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, instrumental in funneling millions of illegal immigrants across the United States southern border into the United States. Moved into, whether it's, Venezuelan immigrants or otherwise, all across the United States. But at the heart of it is the United States going in and destabilizing these countries to begin with. Whether it's Latin America, whether it's Yemen, it doesn't matter, but the United States involvement, Western powers involvement in destabilizing these countries. And then, of course, we're shocked and surprised to find out that these immigrants are coming to the United States. So let's talk about the European side of this. Is it true that there are millions of illegal immigrants or immigrants that have poured into the UK, fundamentally changing the culture of the UK? And is there violence in the UK, is there violence from Muslim immigrants that is uprooting and destroying British culture?
There'd be any evidence of that. I think what happens is that you have two things happening. One is, as you've said, the forever wars, of course, dislodge people from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Libya, etc., from many other countries, and that does cause a wave of migration. And we can't be surprised that happens. And of course, if you want to avoid that, you stop the wars. But the second thing, of course, in which the global economy has changed over the last 30 or 40 years through the role of the American state and the American multinationals, but also of the International Monetary Fund, etc., which has meant that we effectively are skilled workers from developing countries and bringing them here to work, for example, in the UK in the health sector. So that there is a real problem of the way in which the migration has been managed. It's seen as just on the left, it's seen as just this problem of failing to like people with different colour skin. Of course, not what's actually going on here. We're seeing, on the one hand, the forever wars creating these changes, and also the way in which the global economy has changed. The contracting out, the offshoring, etc., has had a dramatic effect on the way in which migration flows work.
What do you see as the main problem here? Is it the Zionist control of this narrative, the funneling of money in order to incite this sort of pandemonium where there technically isn't pandemonium? So you have these street gangs taking to the streets, sort of. I mean, are we being duped? I guess I guess when I get to that question, are we being duped here? Like what we're seeing in these videos, is this all sort of propaganda?
I think so. I mean, there's Zionist money behind this. These people who run this organization, or this sort of amorphous street gang, Tommy Robinson, he's an asset of the Zionist movement, absolutely. But we're also seeing something else, which is that they're trying to do destabilization, but they don't have the numbers to do that. So although we saw significant unrest and attacks on mosques and other Muslim centers over the first couple of weeks, when they then tried a whole series of other demonstrations, there were very, very few people from the far right who turned up because they haven't got the numbers. And that I think illustrates more that this is a provocation rather than a real question of a real social problem or a real question of social unrest.
And so the purpose at the heart of this, if I'm incorrect, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just trying to understand your position and evidence on this, which is, I mean, frankly, it's eye-opening to me. I hadn't considered this piece of it. I've seen what's happening in the United States and the collaboration with these NGOs to destabilize the United States. I've seen that. I've seen trying to sow discontent with, through different communities in the United States on purpose. I've seen that happen. So it's not surprising to me to see it there. Is it your contention that the goal then on the part of these neoconservatives and the sort of the Zionist interests is to make the people afraid, make the residents of the UK feel afraid, feel terrified, and therefore justify sort of attacks on Syria, on Lebanon, on Iran, because the people at home now are terrorized by all of those Islamic terrorists that have now poured into their country? Is that the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly that. I think the preeminent purpose is, well, there's two things. One is that the British government withdrew its objection to arrests for war crimes against Gallant and Netanyahu, and the Zionists don't. It's also been reported that there is now the beginnings of an arms embargo in the UK against Israel, and they don't like that either. Whether it's true that there's actually an embargo or not, in a way, doesn't matter because that's what they believe. So that's enough to press the riot button in Tel Aviv. But I think it's more than that. I think it's also that they want to punish Muslims for being so active in the massive movement against the genocide in Gaza. They see Muslims as being a key component of that movement, just as they were of the movement in 2002-3, and so they want to punish Muslims. And in fact, that's what they've tried to encourage for the last decade and a half throughout Europe, this idea of fighting the jihad, as if that's what ordinary Muslims are doing. And that's what they're trying to do, to try and make it impossible for Muslims to actually contest what's happening in Israel-Palestine and make it impossible for them to effectively oppose the genocide in Gaza. So I think that these are the things which are happening. And of course, as you say, that then is an attempt to encourage fear, to encourage distrust between Muslims and non-Muslims, to try and say these people are outsiders, that there's unrest in this society. Yes, of course, it's about stirring up trouble into the interests of the Zionists who are, and let's face it, they are losing the global PR battle. They have lost the global PR battle. And this is a desperate attempt to try and make it look like the problem is not the genocide in Gaza. The problem is that cultures can't get on with each other.
Right, to change the page, to flip the page, so to speak, and say, so these Muslims who are protesting the genocide in Gaza, then you're trying to paint them all with the same brush, trying to say that all of these protests, whether or not they're peaceful or not, that they're all terrorists. And then it loses their message of peace in Gaza and not the slaughter of innocent people, right? So it's a brilliant strategy, right? Because you're absolutely right. In fact, Israel has just been downgraded. So it's not going well for Israel. We've had many experts on this show who point out that this is a huge mistake on the part of Israel, and they are losing big time. You might see them winning individual battles, but they are losing the massive PR battle here. So that's fascinating. I think this is a great and fascinating discussion. What is the pushback that you get when you make these statements? What do you hear from neoconservatives? What do you hear from Israeli supporters who are just, dyed-in-the-wool Israeli supporters? No matter what you say, they're going to call you an anti-Semite or whatever. But what do they say to you? What is the pushback that you hear from the other side?
Oh, well, I mean, it's worse than that. So look, I was a professor of political sociology at the University of Bristol, and I was sacked from my post for making anti-Zionist comments. I took the university to an industrial tribunal, an employment tribunal. I was found to have been wrongly dismissed, and not dismissed for the reasons the university said, but because I had anti-Zionist views. So that's the first question. The second question is, well, what happens now? I mean, I guess, of course, the Zionists say, oh, he's an anti-Semite, he hates Jews, etc., etc. But what we also find is whenever you mention these links between the Zionists and the far right, people on the left in the anti-war movement, in the supposed Palestine solidarity movement, they denounce me for being conspiratorial, for being an anti-Semite, even although I've had four separate inquiries, all of which cleared me of anti-Semitism. I mean, it's a ridiculous charge. And so what you find is there's a real difficulty of people to actually understand what's going on here. They think this is just something which is not relevant. And I try and show in the research that I do what the evidence is to suggest that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've moved beyond the point now where when people throw out the term anti-Semitism, it's just it lessens the argument, and it's a way for them to not discuss actual issues. When anyone throws around that, we don't take those people seriously anymore. When they throw that statement out, I mean, yeah, I think in the first few weeks after October 7th, that was being thrown around. I think people were being scared. Oh, they don't want to be labeled an anti-Semite. It's like, no, let's have a discussion here. That's childish. And when you throw around that statement, it's like in America when somebody, you're a racist. It just shuts down conversation, and we don't take those people seriously anymore. So having a nuanced discussion about this. So you say you have the evidence, you have the documents, you have the proof that shows these linkages, and I think it's fascinating. Where can people, David, if they want to dive more into this research, they want to understand what you've done in your research over the years, where can you point people to learn more about this?
Well, so the first place to go is to my account on X, which is tracking_power. I also have run for some years now a website called spinwatch.org, where there's a lot of work on the neocons and the funding streams behind the neocons. We were the first ones to start to investigate the funding streams in the UK and where they were coming from. A lot of them came from America, of course. And so those are two places. And I put stuff up there all the time and links to all the articles and interviews that I do. So you can start to have a look there. Spinwatch.org and tracking_power on X.
And I'll get you out of here on this, David. Do you feel like people are being played? I mean, our goal on this show is to really cut through the propaganda. And I often say, please don't be sheep. They want you to believe a certain thing, right? There's a reason you're seeing coverage in newspapers. There's a reason you're seeing coverage on television. They want you to think a certain way. These billionaires who are running the show, we're all just, marionettes to their puppeteers. Do you think that people are being largely played when they in this story, this specific story in the UK?
Well, in all stories, really. I mean, of course, we're being played. I mean, my research specialism, going back years now, is propaganda. So I've been looking at propaganda for a long, long time. Yes, people are being played. Yes, there are front groups and cutouts which are there to suggest that there's a wide support for something for which there's not really any support at all. I mean, just to leave you on one example, the British Foreign Intelligence Agency, MI6, has been putting about the story that these riots were caused by Russia. Now, this is the same people who, of course, invented Russiagate in the US, where Trump was apparently elected because Russian bots in a derelict factory in St. Petersburg. This is the same people, the very same people who did that, are now suggesting that actually Putin is behind these Islamophobic riots. Now, part of the agenda there is, of course, to defend Israel, to make people look the other direction. Oh, yes, we hate the Russians. It's definitely the Russians. Definitely nothing to do with Israel. Let's just pretend. And that, yeah, of course, we're being played.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always tell people just to, remember the history with the CIA and Mossad and the connections there. Very, very deep, and they love playing us. Don't fall for it. Absolutely don't fall for it. David Miller, eye-opening discussion. I'm sure many of our viewers will agree with you. Many of them will not. But hey, that's the beauty of humanity and having a nuanced discussion about something. And I'll point them to your website to go learn more and follow you on X. David Miller, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks so much, David. And really fascinating discussion. I think that's what's lost in sort of modern media, having an interesting deep dive, nuanced discussion about something that might make you uncomfortable. Again, you're not growing unless you're uncomfortable, right? We only grow through discomfort. So if there was something you heard in this that might have made you uneasy, then dive more deeply into it. I'm constantly feeling uneasy as I dive into different news sources and want to learn more about it. And wait, what story are they telling us? What is the propaganda that we're supposed to be led to believe? Whether you're like pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine, it doesn't matter. But what are the powers that be trying to tell us here, and how are they trying to control us? So I find that fascinating to get into the heat of all of this and deep dive this. So thank you guys for indulging us and enjoying that conversation. I should point out we do have a daily newsletter where we cover stories that are, the mainstream media largely ignores. Just come on over to redacted.inc, put in your email address. You'll receive a welcome email from me, from Clayton. And then you just need to move it into your inbox because we publish the newsletter Monday through Thursday. And, we cover about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, stories that, the mainstream media largely ignores, or they put a bunch of propaganda on top of it. So again, subscribe to our free newsletter, again, totally free. And it'll publish on Monday again, as we start the crazy new week. We'll have the Democratic National Convention next week. It's going to be insane. So we'll be following all of that and more. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here live at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. Have a great evening, everyone.